Tell you about it. A little bit about my pop, a little bit of life growing up, what happened in my life that changed my life, that allowed me to be here, and who I'm trying to be now. See, you've heard a little bit, Dean sharing about our family. We've been blessed, many opportunities. But our family wasn't always wealthy. In fact, my mother told me stories that in the late 50s when her and my pop were dating and when my father asked her to marry him, that he sold his old pickup truck to buy her engagement ring. They were incredibly poor. Little even know that that marriage would lead to a little bit of money from my mother's parents and a loan from Bank Atlantic to help him to buy a used garbage truck. He bought a garbage truck in Fort Lauderdale, an old one from an African-American man that I had the pleasure to meet. And he started a company called Southern Sanitation. It was around for many years, and on my way to work at Southern Sanitation as a child is when I first was exposed to Faith Farm. We used to drive by every day. It's amazing. Mom told me stories about Pop. She said that he'd get up early in the morning, put on his work clothes, had a part-time helper, and he'd go out and pick up garbage in Fort Lauderdale. He said he'd come home at lunchtime and take a shower, I imagine put on some cologne or whatnot to try to disguise what he had been doing earlier that morning, and he'd go out and sell new business. And Southern Sanitation grew. He was a bit of a marketing guy, although not many people know it. On the side of our trucks, the Southern Sanitation trucks, he had phrases on there like, "We cater weddings." This, back way before political correctness, and Mom told me that he used to say, "We cater Polish weddings," because he came from Chicago, and the Dutchman, he used to make fun of the Poles, but she convinced him even then that that was not appropriate. Say, "Caution, this truck has bad breath, and only in South Florida, free snow removal." It snowed in the 70s, but it never snowed. Well, Dad went on to merge that company with the company my uncle was running up in the Midwest in waste management. You've probably seen their Burgundy trucks was born. And as Dad was working hard to build the business, my mother decided that she wasn't happy and she was going to divorce my father. So I was 5 and my brother was 3, and we were going to church and pumping up to a little Dutch Reformed church there. It's now the Reformed Church of America. And if you're not familiar with it, if you think about the Baptists kind of being fairly rigid and conservative, if you continued over another 80 or 90 degrees, you'd run into the Dutch Reformed Church. And they were just really strict. And when my mother talked to the pastor and said that she was thinking of divorcing my father, the pastor said, "Well, I don't advise it, we won't endorse it, and in fact, if you do it, we're going to kick you out of the church. You're no longer welcome to come to the church." Well, she thought about it, time went on, and she said, "You know what, this is the right thing for me," and divorced my father, and subsequently the church exiled her and my brother Scott and I from the church. So what I'd like to say is if you've been injured by the church or somebody in the church, I want to say sorry, because that's not who Jesus is. That's, it's the church is wonderful people trying to do the right thing, sometimes living by doctrines that were made by men and women, but it's certainly not God's heart that she would have been exiled. Well, that left her no choice, as she felt, and she took my brother and I, and we moved back to Chicago, and I did 8 years in the cold, which was a shock. And I love being down here, especially this year. But during that time, some would say that that loss drove my father to be as successful as he was. I think that it was all part of God's plan. And he went on and worked very hard. I didn't get to see him a lot. Sometimes it was just a couple times a year. My mother loved the Lord very much and had a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Tried to ground my brother Scott and I in our faith, but needless to say, we didn't make it to church very much. Just enough to hear that there was a God, that he had a son that came to this earth and died a horrible death, nailed to a cross named Jesus, and that he loved me very much. I heard about heaven, and you better believe in the Dutch Reformed Church I heard about the alternative. And early on I said, no, I don't want that scary place. I want to go to the other place. All right. Well, as Dad went on and became more and more successful, he worked very hard and has all of his life. I like any young man, I want to be like my pop. I wanted to have the things he had. I wanted to be able to do for people like he did. I wanted to have, just the power that he had to help change people's lives. And so my focus became all about that. I had forgotten a lot of things my mother talked about by the time that I was in high school. I went on to college in Florida here. and graduated just in time to join Dad at Blockbuster Video. I grew up working here in Pompano. I grew up at the landfill. I used to spend my summers there with my grandfather, and I have fond memories. And my kids drive by, then we drive by from Delray to go to Calgary where they go to school, and they all go, "Dad, it smells, put on the recirculation." I said, "Guys, it smells like money to me, come on." That's how they started making money, you know. I'm suddenly like, "No, Dad." I won't tell you any of those stories. Went on and I got out of school and got involved with Wayne Sr. as he got involved with Blockbuster Video, and he lent my brothers and sisters and I some money, and I found myself in a position that I never thought I'd be in. I made a lot of money in the stock market, money that I didn't earn, money that I didn't deserve, and money that I had no idea what to do with. I just married my bride, and we had met when we were 15. We've been married 22 years, and I had my first 2 children. And my mother was would come to me and say, "You know, son, this is all great, but you know, the life you live isn't really reality." And she said, "You know, I'm very worried." She said, she would tell me, she said, I'm worried about how you're going to ground your children, how you're going to teach them what's right and what's wrong and what matters in life." I say, "Well, I think you need to get back to the church, and I think you need to get your children enrolled in Sunday school, and I think you need to teach them about Jesus." And it was then that I began to realize that God was pursuing me, but that I wanted nothing to do with Him yet. And I would kind of make excuses, and I'd say, "Well, Mom, you know, I'm working a lot. I work, you know, 6 days a week, and on Sunday it's really my only day to sleep in." And when I didn't have the heart to tell her, which, you know, I knew that she deep down, I knew that she knew that what I was really saying is, "Mom, I'm too hungover. I've been out drinking Friday and Saturday night, and the last place I want to be on Sunday morning is in church, sitting with people that are trying to do the right thing and are doing the right thing." So I kept running. But you see, God had a plan. Most of you know that. And if you don't, He does, and He won't keep chasing. That's a warning. He kept putting people in my life, and one day I got a call from a friend that said, "Hey, Junior," said, "You know, we got an opportunity to go to South Carolina and go on a nuclear submarine and cruise from South Carolina all the way down to Fort Lauderdale. Are you interested?" I said, "I'm a man, aren't I?" "Of course." "When do we go?" He said, "Well, we're going to go tomorrow." I said, "All right, short notice, but not a problem." Turns out that they had met a captain of a submarine in Fort Lauderdale when he was in for Fleet Week, and he had called and offered my friend an opportunity to go on this fast-attack nuclear submarine. So we flew up, and I got on the submarine, and I met Captain Brad Fleetwood McDonald, an incredible man. And he took us on his submarine, and we spent 3 days underway. And there wasn't enough places for everybody to sleep, so we were doing what they call hot racking, you know, where someone would get up and you'd lay down. And I don't think I slept maybe 8 or 10 hours the whole 3 days. I was having the time of my life. I mean, we sat in sonar listening for, you know, vehicle vessels that might attack us, like fishing boats and, you know, freighters and whatnot. It could happen, probably not. And I spent time in the galley. I cooked for the guys. We made pizza at midnight. And we even set a record on the submarine for how many people you could get in a torpedo tube. 5. 5 grown men to fit in a torpedo tube. Listen, if you ever get the opportunity, don't be the gung-ho guy like me and go, "I'll go first." And as I'm backing into this torpedo tube, we're kind of rolling my shoulders in there. Everybody else is backing in, and you know what I'm seeing in front of me. When the guys closed the door and asked permission to fill the tube with air, I was having a panic attack. Unfortunately, the door opened and I got out all right. Well, other than Captain Brad liked to fish, and I love to fish, and so I thought, well, he took me on his boat that goes underwater. I'm going to take him on my boat that sometimes catches fish, and we began to spend time together. And over the next few years, I began to realize how different Captain Brad was. I'd been blessed. I'd met presidents and ball players and all kinds of incredible people through my pop, but nobody like Captain Brad. See, he had a peace about him and a joy and just a feeling that when you met him, it felt like you'd known him all your life. And that was something that, as time went on, more and more, I realized that I wanted that in my life, that I wanted to be like this man, Captain Brad. When we'd go fishing, he always had his Bible and whatnot, and I was young in my management career, and I'd start to ask him questions. I thought, hey, anybody that could take 105 guys on a submarine and deploy for 6 months at a time, he's got to know about management, about conflict resolution, and all those things. And every time I asked him a question, he'd open up his Bible, and he'd take and read me some scripture verses, and he'd say, this is how I apply this verse to this situation. And he referred to this as life's ownership manual, much like you find in your glove box of your car. And he said, all the answers are in here, Junior. And he was never preaching to me, but he just kept being a part of my life, investing in me, much like the folks here have invested in you that have gone through the program. And one day, fishing was especially slow, and I was sitting there, and I said, Captain Brad, I said, my heart is I really would like to be more like you. How do I become more like you? What do I have to learn? What do I have to read? What do I have to do? And he said, well, Junior, what you need is you need to have a personal relationship with God. I said, well, how do I do that? What do I do? What's missing? He said, well, Junior, you have a hole in your heart. I said, I have a what? He said, you have a hole in your heart. I said, I don't understand. He said, well, have you heard that you've been created in God's image? I said, I have. I never understood that. He said, well, it's a little bit misunderstood. He said, God left a place where he needs to live in your heart. And he said, this hole in your heart, he said, have you ever heard of a black hole in space? I said, I've seen on the TV where the renderings and it sucks in planets and stars and all those types of things. He said, exactly. He said, it's got a giant gravity field. And anything that gets near it gets sucked in, never to be seen again, or so we believe. And I said, okay. He said, that hole in your heart, it's the same way. He said, that hole in your heart is consuming everything that you put into it. Alcohol, poor relationships, houses, cars, trips, boat trips, fishing trips. Don't get me wrong, I love coming with you, but that hole is consuming all of those things. And the only way that you are going to find the peace that you're looking for and find success and true success in your life is to fill that hole in your heart. And he said the only way you can do that is with a relationship with God. I went home. All right. Could be that simple. Could that be what's missing? I began to look for a church home. I started asking my friends, Bill, do you go to church? No, Junior, I don't go to church. Junior, church? No way, man. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, because anybody that was in church wouldn't have been running with me who likes the way that I was behaving, the things that I were doing. It wasn't a whole lot different than we heard Tom talk about or Danny talk about. It was just at a different level. But it was the same flawed problem, the same flawed things that I was doing over and over again, looking for a different result. Finally, I found a friend. I said, Lynn, you go to church? She said, oh, I go to a great church. Really? Great. Tell me about it. Our pastor's young and talks about current events and leaves you with something to do when you leave of how your life should be different. And he likes to scuba dive. And what I remembered at the end of that time was he likes to scuba dive, which was like my second favorite thing to do. So I chose the church sophisticated selection process of the pastor likes to scuba dive. She was right. He was a wonderful pastor, great man, gave wonderful sermons, and I often left, feeling very convicted and wanting to be a different person. A lot of times even with tears in my eyes, leaving with a message of how I was to be different. I began to go more and more. My bride started coming, and soon we had 2 or 3 rows filled. And if I was in town, I was there, 3 rows back on the left on Sundays. I put my money in the offering plate. I had my own owner's manual and whatnot. I had memorized some scripture, and when I spent time with Captain Brad, it really wasn't a whole lot different. That is until one day, 13 years and 2 months ago, in November of 2000, that a couple friends invited me to church. Junior, you want to go to church with us? I said, sure, man, I'll go to church. We'll come pick you up. I said, all right, great. What time on Sunday? He said, no, it's tonight. I said, well, tonight's Wednesday night. He said, yeah, our church has services on Wednesday, too. I said, yeah, all right, great. And they came to pick me up and took me to one of these big mega churches, and I walked in and I was kind of overwhelmed. There were no hymnals, and all the words were up on big screens and whatnot. I sang songs I'd never heard before, and the pastor preached for about 50 minutes, which was very different from our church. And at the end, he talked about that it was raining outside really, really hard, and he said, be careful when you drive home tonight. He said, but you know what? Should anything happen, and heaven forbid you were to die on the way home, do you know for certain that at that moment you would be taken and arrive with Jesus, that you would be right there one day? So not that he died, but that if he did, that you would arrive in heaven. He said, if you don't know for sure, if you've never had a point in your life where you could say that you know for certain that you asked Jesus to live in your heart, and that if something happened to you, that you know for certain that you would be in heaven on your death, you could come forward tonight and pray a simple prayer with us up here. And he invited people to come forward. And people at this big church started walking forward and whatnot, and the other people in the congregation are clapping, and I'm looking around because at our church, we were quiet, and even when the choir knocked it out of the park, nobody really clapped. You wanted to, but you just kind of sat there like, yeah, that was really good. Nobody really clapped. And he came back up a few minutes later, and he said, do you think that there's more to being a Christian than just going to church? I'm sitting there going, maybe. He said, well, why do you think that God allowed you to be born? Do you think he has a plan for your life? Why do he allow you to have the things that you have? Oh, easy there, Pastor. I got a lot of stuff. He said, I think that God has a plan for that too. All right, you've got my attention now. He said, in fact, I believe that God allowed you to be born for a purpose, and that he wants to have a personal relationship with you. He wants to share with you why he allowed you to be born, and what your purpose on earth is here, and what he wants you to do while you're here on this earth for X number of years. And he said, if you'd like to know what that purpose is, if you'd like to enter into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, you could come forward right now, join these people here at the front of the stage, and you could take and pray this simple prayer with us in a second and ask Jesus to live in your heart. That was a kind of an uncontrollable thing. I stood up out of my chair, and like there was a spring in there, and someone pushed the button, and I had sweat on my upper lip and on my forehead and all, and it felt very warm. And I heard this voice that I recognize now that said, sit down, Junior, everybody's looking at you. What are you doing? There was no way you could have got me back in that chair. I made my way down the row there to the aisle, and friends that came with me started to follow behind me, and I made my way up to the front of that church, and I fell to my knees and I started to cry. And man, you can appreciate this, and not like that man cry like, tear in my eye. I mean, like, I'm 5 years old. Remember that? You fall off your bike and your hands and knees are all stitched up and blood's running down your leg and you're on fire and you're like, I ain't gonna live from this. That's that kind of crying. It's like I wanted my daddy to bawl my eyes out, telling God that I'm sorry, and that he really did want to have this personal relationship with me, that I was open and that I wanted to have it with him. I prayed that simple prayer, and I got up and turned around, and there was 3,000 people looking at me. Excuse me, lady, but it's not running out of my nose. Tears running down my face, and I'm going, my sleeves are too short, trying to do something with something, and everybody clapping and going, giving me the thumbs up. I'm like, oh boy, this, I don't know. And my friend's wife said, Junior, you got saved tonight. I said, no, I didn't get saved. I said, oh, recommitment. She looked at me like, right, you got the real thing, you just don't know it yet. She was right. I never understood or liked the word saved, but she was exactly right. I tried to go on and be the person that I was in the past, to go to the parties and say the outlandish things that I did that I got away with. And when I wake up in the morning, I feel terrible. And I talk to my friends, they're like, how you doing? I was like, man, I feel horrible. They're like, well, no doubt, the way you drank last night. I'm like, dude, this is not a hangover terrible. This is, I just feel horrible, broken. And finally, a few weeks had gone by, and I got with my friends that took me. They said, how's it going? And I told them, horrible realization, I've been taking God out of drinking. All right, life needs to change. And it did, fortunately. You see, my bride, she's so wise, she's my hero. She said all things happen in God's time for a reason. She came to her faith about 18 months after me and then passed me by a long time ago. It's all right. Used to being surrounded by people that know more than I. It's a good thing. And it's true, because 9 months after I came to my faith, I lost my mom. She had gotten sick, and we thought it was bronchitis. And she started going to the doctor, and she wasn't getting any better. And my bride, she's fantastic. She said, why don't we move Mom's in with us? I said, we could do that? She said, absolutely. We'll care for her. And started going to the doctors, and they started mentioning that maybe cancer. And Mom and I began to pray that it wasn't cancer, but she had been a smoker for the majority of her life. And she quit about a year before she ended up passing. And you know, we kept doing tests. They couldn't find it. They said, well, listen, whatever's going on in her lung, it's so bad it's going to kill her, so we need to take part of her lung. All right, it's radical, but if that's going to fix her, that's fine. So she went in, and we're waiting, and the doctor comes out, and you've all seen the TV shows. You're looking for the happy doctor face. There's no happy doctor face. And he says, well, we took your mother's left lung. I said, well, you're only supposed to take half of her lung. So they said, well, you know, where there was cancer in there, we needed to take it out. I said, great, so then you've got her cancer, and she's going to be all right. Well, not exactly, but we can talk about that later. I said, no, right now. No, listen, just tell me. Well, Junior, in reality, we found cancer in some of her other internal organs, her adrenal gland, and the spots on her CAT scan that we saw in her brain, those are cancerous tumors, those are Mets. I said, great, okay, how long? Well, no, how long? A few months. All right. Those few months were the most incredible time that I've spent with my mom. She raised my brother and I. We were mama's boys, still am. She loved us very, very much, and I got to love and care for her and honor her and take care of her. We went to chemotherapy together a couple times, and we went for radiation because they said that she wouldn't be able to talk. She'd lose her voice, and that was one thing Mom loved to do. She loved to talk. And so we knew that we had to do that so that she could talk. And we shared. We shared with people why we knew that it wasn't the end, why we knew that there was more beyond this. And one day at our home, she passed. A month later, my grandfather, the one that was involved with Wayne Sr., the one that would take me to the landfill in Pompano, he passed. Shortly thereafter, I lost my cousin Dan. He committed suicide. And his bride called up and said, Junior, can you come out and memorialize Dan and tell people why, you know, why this happened? And he said, I can't tell them why, but I'll come out. We lost our best friends, lost a 2-year-old to heart disease. Fonda and I, my brother and I, we were Dylan's godparents. See, God knew that the old Wayne Jr., he would have gotten on Dad's plane, would have gotten on the boat, and I would have gotten in the bottle. And I wouldn't have been there for my mom, for my brother, for my pop, for our friends. I wouldn't have been able to honor my mom. I wouldn't have been able to do her eulogy. I wouldn't have been able to be there when Pop said, you know, Junior, you did a pretty good job eulogizing your mom. You think you can eulogize Papa? Because I don't think that I can do it. For him, he doesn't really give compliments, so a pretty good job is like a big deal. I said, yeah, Pop, I've got this power that I don't quite understand, but I think I can. For Mignon, when she called up, and for our friends when they lost their son. See, it was then that I realized that, you know, don't get me wrong, having money is nice, but it isn't all that it's meant to be. It isn't all that it's cracked up to be. It doesn't fix things. The true wealth occurs the day you open your heart and you ask Jesus Christ to come and live inside your heart and change your life. That's where you get power from. See, I realized that in the past I had had a relationship with the church, with an institution, with wonderful people inside of it, but that they didn't have the power. And that's why I left church, feeling like a failure, because I couldn't change on my own. And then the day that I opened my heart and allowed Christ to come inside, that no longer was I working on Junior power, that I was working on his power. That's how I stopped drinking. 12 years, 1 month, and 5 days ago. All right. I can't take any credit for it. It's all him every single day. So I'm just like you. I'm a bit different social class, okay. But I'm a broken individual doing it one day at a time, just like all of you. But we have the same daddy, and he's got all the power in the world. Change lives. So, question. Do you know for certain that when you die, where you're going to go? I ask because just because you're in church, or just because you grew up in a religious family, doesn't mean that you're going to go to heaven. You have to ask. A gift, just like was given to you here. a gift of relationship with the people that helped you change your lives, a gift by people here that introduced you to Jesus Christ to help you change your life, a gift. Because we can't earn our way in, we can't buy our way in. The only way in is submission. Admitting that we've sinned, that we've fallen short of being perfect, which if you're anything like me, a long way from perfect, and asking for forgiveness and asking Christ to live in your heart. I would be remiss to not do it today. I won't ask you to come forward. I won't ask you to raise your hands or anything else. I'm just going to ask you to repeat a prayer like I prayed. It's not the words, it's what God hears in your heart. My favorite verse in the Bible is Revelation 3:20. Jesus is speaking. He says, I stand at the door and I knock. He says, whoever opens the door, that I will come in, and I will sup with you, I'll eat with you forever and ever. My hope, that you hear him knocking. My prayer, that you'll open the door and let him in. We've all gotten a hug before from somebody, you know, and go, that was kind of a phony hug. And then we've gotten really wonderful hugs from somebody that just changed your life, and you feel their life force flowing through you, that they love you and they care for you. Jesus could barge in and say, I'm coming in, but he'd much rather be asked. He wants that real hug. So if there's not been a point in your life that you know for certain that you've asked him to come and live in your heart, why not today? Because tomorrow is not guaranteed. You bow your heads, we'll pray this simple prayer, and I'm standing between you and lunch. You can repeat after me quietly or out loud, however you feel led. There's no right or wrong. Merciful Father, I recognize that I am a sinner. Thank you for coming and dying on the cross for my sins. I ask you to forgive my sins